All right, everybody, welcome to Real Estate Strategies with Remax Hallmark. And over the next couple of episodes, we're going to be talking to our fantastic guests who are involved in the technology space as far as it comes to real estate and how they're helping our real estate agents' lives a lot better by helping with technology and letting our agents focus on doing what they do best, which is focusing on their business. So today we have a special guest, and you've probably never heard of this company before, unless, of course, you're a developer, vibe coder, or real estate agent who's really enthusiastic about this side of the technology. Welcome to Patrick Arlia of Repliers. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Johnder.
You're welcome. Now, Patrick, because you go by Pat sometimes, and whenever you and I meet, do you prefer I address you as Patrick or Pat during this podcast?
Most people call me Pat.
Okay, so we'll do Pat.
Pat's fine, but
okay, awesome. And our story, with me and Pat, go way back. I think it was 2020. I was looking at some of our earlier emails just to see how far back that I discovered Repliers. And for those of you who are watching and listening to this, the reason you've never heard of Repliers before, chances are you've never heard of Repliers before, is because they do something that's so niche in the real estate data space that I'm going to get Pat to explain it. And then we're going to talk about how, for example, you could create today a website that's the equivalent of what some website providers with full-on IDX, Valve features, all the bells and whistles, you could actually create this today with his technology plus AI in 15 minutes. And Pat did a video on that. So Pat, before we get into details and whatnot, can you introduce yourself, Repliers, and of course, what your company does?
Sure, of course. So my name is Pat Arlia. I'm the co-founder of Repliers. And essentially what we are at a high level is a real estate data company, okay? And we don't sell data. We help you access your data from your MLS, okay? So traditionally, accessing data from your MLS has been very difficult. And we basically exist to simplify that so that if you're needing data from your MLS to build a website or an app or some other compliant use case, and you use Repliers, we essentially cut down the amount of time and effort that it takes to do that. And we do that in a very user-friendly way. So, path A would be to go directly to your MLS to get the data, and that's not very user-friendly. Or path B would be to use us and, just streamline the whole process.
All right. And that's the simplest way you could put it. I mean, unless you're a developer or like me, you started using AI to do some vibe coding or no coding, all these terms are still being thrown around. The essence of it is what does real estate data look like? Pat, through Repliers and his company and his fantastic team, they sort of like repackage it and make it easier to use. So Pat, let's talk about you for a moment. So you have a development background, but how did you get started? Like what were you doing before you founded Repliers, and what was the cause, or what was that spark that caused you to create this company?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have a friend that is a real estate agent in the Toronto market, somebody I've known the majority of my life, okay? Prior to, getting my feet wet with real estate technology, I was always a techie. I ran an e-commerce company for just over a decade. I was always building software. I started experimenting with software when I was, I think, probably 10 years old, right? And he kind of approached me. His name is Joe, by the way. Joe Rea, and the group is called By Jesse and Joe, and to this day they're still a client of ours. And he approached me and he said, "Hey, is there some way you can use your skills to help me with my business?" And of course, like most agents, he was building a team and he was after lead gen, so he wanted to generate more leads, get more eyeballs on his brand. And I said, "Yeah, I think so." I had really good knowledge of SEO and website development and that sort of thing. So we shook hands and decided to partake on this project. And at the time, I knew nothing about the industry. I knew nothing about data access. But I knew I needed listings from his MLS to sort of create this consumer search for his website, right? And I discovered along the way that there was nothing that I could leverage as a developer. So developers are, when we're tasked with something, we go and do our research and we see what tools are out there that will make my life easier, right? We go to GitHub and we see, did anybody do this before? Can I leverage their code to kind of, make things go a lot faster for me? Is there any service that I could connect to? Some cloud-based service or, any number of things. And the answer was no, there was nothing. So I had to build this from scratch. So I had to, basically send emails to the real estate board, try to figure out how do I get access to this data. Then I understood that there was a licensing process that was involved, which, is still in place today. And that's just to make sure that whoever's asking for the data is actually licensed to get the data, right? So I finally, got that all out of the way, and then they introduced me to the way that they delivered data, and at the time it was something called RETS, which stands for the Real Estate Transaction Standard, right? Which was something that the industry built for itself. Very primitive kind of interface that a developer can use to download the data, right? So I had to download the data and I had to put it all in my own database, and I had to download all the images. And I had to set up these jobs that would routinely refresh the data set. And of course, that wasn't straightforward, right? There was bugs. There was, hey, this listing's supposed to be sold, but it's still active. And, it took quite a bit of time to iron all that out. So, just going back to Joe, I shook hands with Joe thinking, this would be a couple weeks project. And, like a year later, I'm pulling my hair out still, right? And I didn't sign up for that. And, Joe, I worked with Joe exclusively for many years, and his partner, Jesse. And, right around late 2018, I decided it was time to productize some of this infrastructure that I built, because I thought other developers are going to have the same problem that I have here, right? They could all benefit from the work that I've done. Why are we all solving these same problems? Like, there's a lot of redundant work going on. So just to put that in simple terms, I mean, if 10,000 people want to build a website, 10,000 people have to figure out how to get access to the data. 10,000 people have to download all that data. There's 10,000 copies of the same images out there to support those 10,000 websites. Like, it is crazy to think that there's no concept of shared infrastructure that everybody can leverage together to bring costs down, to speed up development timelines. So that's basically where Repliers came from. It was me, being sort of immersed in the space from a developer perspective, understanding that there was an opportunity there was a gap in infrastructure. And I see, you see in other industries, these models, these shared infrastructure models exist, right?
Right.
If you're running an e-commerce, and my background was in e-commerce. So if you're running an e-commerce website and you're selling your product online, you're not going to invent payments. You're not going to go to every bank and set up, payments gateways with all the banks and everything like that. You're going to use Stripe, right? Because that's going to simplify your job. Why would you do all that work? They've done all that plumbing for you already.
Right.
Twilio would be another good analogy. So if you want to build a telecommunications product, and when I say that, like, the most simple one would be text messaging alerts or something like that. You're not going to go and build a telecom infrastructure and deal with the CRTC and, all that kind of stuff. You're just going to use Twilio and send some text messages, right? So the concept's the same. And that's sort of, what brought on the idea.
Yeah, so it's, it's a classic entrepreneurial story, basically, where you weren't aware of the industry, real estate. I mean, you obviously know what real estate is, but in terms of all the inner workings of it, you had to go through these challenges. You discovered a problem. You discovered how big of a scale it is. And then you realized, hey, why don't I do this route instead of like the typical, for example, real estate entrepreneur that created, let's say, a website service or a CRM service. You decided to go one step above that, which in a sense is dealing in the data, right? Which is, I kind of geek out in terms of these kinds of details. You kind of know that. And it's very rare for somebody listening or watching to this who is a real estate agent who can actually understand in terms of what kind of data really needs to be delivered for these things to happen. So why don't we spend a brief moment in appreciation of what your business is all about. When you're talking about REST feeds, today it's the RESO API. What do all these jargon mean? And like for real estate agents, because I mean, this is the audience here. When you look at your listing, every single one of the pieces of detail on your listing is a piece of data that gets communicated not only through your MLS, but through Repliers and Pat's company. This is sort of what bridges the gap between the database that's sitting on your MLS board to your website. So Pat, give us a little quick rundown in terms of what's the magic behind you've now aggregated all that into one place. And the ultimate benefit, of course, is to ease development. In the real estate agent's perspective, how does that make their life easier?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're an agent and you've crossed the bridge and you've decided, I want to build something, that's where you're getting yourself into a lot of work, right? So there's a number of tools out there that agents can subscribe to from industry vendors that are turnkey. And, you know, you're getting the same product that every other agent that subscribes to that vendor's product is getting. And that's fine. But if you decide, hey, you know, I'm going to build this myself, I have this idea. It always starts with an idea, right? You're getting yourself into quite a bit of work. And, you know, that's sort of where we come in. And so if you're an agent or a broker or a team that has an idea and you want to build it, it makes a difference in your life because we just really remove the complexity and the resources and the time that are typically involved to build that. Mm-hmm. And now, you know, what we're seeing with as the popularity of, you know, things like vibe coding increases is that this technology is more and more relevant to the everyday agent. Whereas like even a year ago, this technology was really only relevant to the builders, the mm-hmm. agents that had the ideas that wanted to build technology to compete. Now it's like, it's very approachable for the average agent.
Right. So let's take this through a journey that a real estate agent would go through then. So for example, years ago, way before I heard about Repliers, the only way a real estate agent would get a website is you would sign up with a company. Well, first of all, I mean, the very basic option is you create your own website. Way back then, it was just HTML and JavaScript. Then there was WordPress that started coming in. Then WordPress plugins came in. So real estate agents who have been around that long, you can appreciate sort of the evolution of this. And then you started seeing these companies, you know, for the sake of this episode, I'm not going to go into specific names of brokerages until Pat starts to mention some of them. But there are some brokerages that are very tech centric. And then they started to build these massive websites with all the data, all the statistics, all the bells and whistles. You could literally, and then Vow came in, which is, you know, all of a sudden virtual office websites existed. But for a real estate agent to come into this, you'd have to go to company A or company B, subscribe to their service. There's a lot of rigidity in that because however their templates and look and feel is, and however they operated their platform, you're at the mercy of that. Now, when Pat put out his video the other day about building within 15 minutes any kind of a website you want, real estate agents today who are watching and listening to this, the advantage with AI now is you could literally go to, and we're going to get into this in a bit, like these vibe coding platform or no coding platform, where you could just say, build me a website, use Repliers API, this is what I want on it. So what's the significance of that, Pat, in terms of like a real estate agent today that wants to undertake such an ambitious project? Maybe give us an idea of what that means. What platforms can they use for this? And when we're talking about Repliers, some of you might be scratching your head, and I don't quite get what Pat's product is really, or what the service is. You know, it's an API. It's a bunch of data. Why don't you bridge sort of make sense of that for the real estate agent who, whether today, 3 years, or 5 years from now, will get that aha moment and say, you know what, I can actually build whatever website I want, whatever app I want with the real estate data that I want.
Sure. So there's always going to be the innovators, right? And even if there's something that's out there on the market that serves their needs, they're still going to build their own thing, right? I happen to be one of those people, right? I love doing it. It's really fulfilling for me to build something and ship it and be able to customize it. And then there's the builders that build because they have to, because there's no solution out there that meets their needs, right? So let's give like a simple example. Like maybe you've got an open house coming up this weekend, and you want to place a QR code on a table, and if somebody scans that QR code, you want it to you want a registration form to pop up so that they can basically identify themselves as coming there. And maybe you're trying to generate leads for unrepresented seller or buyers rather, right? So there's a little bit of a lead generation component there. And maybe there's not a product on the market that's going to do that for you. And it's the weekend's in 2 days and you don't really have time to do the research because you're running around doing this and that. Maybe you just want to tackle that yourself. Maybe you just want to pull up a vibe coding platform like Lovable or Replit, right, or Bubble, and just go in there and tell it exactly that. Like I need this tool that's going to allow my open house visitor to register. And by the way, I'd like to show them or maybe send them open houses every week, right? And that's where we come in, right? So that it's very easy to pull up, like a Lovable and create a little registration app. But the minute you say, I want it to do something that requires data from your MLS, that's where it gets really tricky when you're building your own stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at that point, you're just going to tell Lovable, I'm going to use Repliers. It's a compliant solution. I have a subscription. It's hooked up to my MLS. You're going to give it your Repliers credentials, and it's going to pull in that open house information and do exactly what you've asked it to do.
Right. So basically, there's no limit anymore because, and I'll share some of the stuff that we've done because we are one of Repliers' customers, and we're very happy and proud to say that we use them because it has. This may sound like a testimonial, but basically it has shortened the development time that it took for our team to be able to plug in listings into applications that Remax Hallmark itself uses, such as the Remax Hallmark Hub. We're creating a whole bunch of apps for the benefit of our agents. But basically what this means is that a real estate agent, a broker owner, an innovator, an entrepreneur can basically come up with an idea and say, hey, you know what? Wouldn't it be great if I could create this lead generation platform or this particular model or something that could help real estate agents with marketing? And you could vibe code this. And then, of course, I don't recommend that you unless you know what you're doing. Of course, there's a certain limit to what you can do with that. I still highly recommend, and the same thing we do, we work with developers. I give them the idea. Here you go. Here's what I put together. Make it safe, make it secure. But basically, it goes to the extent that you could, and I'm not recommending this practice, but you could literally go to a competitor's website and you see, hey, you know what? I kind of like the way they do that. Maybe I can sort of replicate this model, but what's the missing piece? The missing piece is real estate data. And all you've got to do basically is use a service such as Repliers to plug it in. Because the alternative, I've seen some agents that I've talked to who aren't using, your platform or any other similar platform, which I don't know of any right now, but they would literally have to go through the MLS and, pretty much scrape the data that's on the page. Now, you could imagine the amount of work it would take to do that, not to mention it's very archaic to do such a thing like that. But something like this is like just turning on the tap and the data just flows, and you can then focus on how do you innovate so that you as a real estate agent or as a broker owner can innovate, or as a team leader can bring innovative platforms and products and services to your clientele. So Pat, we're 20 minutes into the conversation, and there's still going to be those that are listening to this and still trying to figure their way out. There's some that are the aha moment and the light bulbs are now going off in their mind. In terms of the future of where this brings, because your company's been around for a while, you work with MLSs throughout North America, you work with different companies, some big brand names. You can go to their website and have a look, including Remax Hallmark. So you work with many large companies. What does the future hold for your company? And how do you see a shift happening when it comes to data and how it's delivered, not only for real estate agents, but for the general public, for the buyers and sellers and investors that are out there?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time, right? Like the space is very fragmented, right? So we have hundreds of MLSs across North America. And some of the markets are more progressive than others. And what that means is, in Toronto, by the way, is a very progressive market. But what that means is, maybe they're not innovating as much in those markets as in other larger metros usually. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see that in the larger metros, I think that a lot of the MLSs are going to start to embrace different data delivery methods, right? So right now, the MLSs can't be everything for everyone, right? Which is why they deliver data in a standard sort of way to everyone. It's like, here's the data, take it, and then go and innovate on top of it, right? And I think what a lot of conversation in the industry is about right now is about more innovative ways to deliver that data and wrapping more value around that data. So I think, that positions us in a very good way for the future, and especially because we live in sort of an on-demand society right now. Everybody wants things right away, right? Nobody wants to wait. So if you have products, I always say, if you design a product and it saves people time, you've designed a good product, right? So the meter should always be the amount of time that you're saving people in the task that they are looking to perform. And if you're doing that well, people are going to take note and they're going to endorse you. They're going to tell their MLS, hey, there's this product that, some others are using in other markets. And it's really cool and it's saving them a lot of time and it's compliant. Their MLS approved it and actually, are doing some collaborative things with this company. So I think over time we'll start to see companies like ours and companies and other companies helping the MLS augment their data delivery so that it serves their members much better.
Right. And within what you're able to share with us, of course, you have confidentiality agreements with some of your clientele. What are some of the innovative things you've seen? Not only, AI vibe coding, that's a whole new thing that's just recently happened. And so I'm sure you're going to see a whole wave of that. But even with traditional development, like what are some of the companies you are able to talk about and what were they able to do and what were they able to achieve as a result of working with your company?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing definitely a shift in the way software is used now, right? So, like think about a traditional interface, right? Like the way you typically would interact with a piece of software. You'd log into it, and you would type, and you would click on things, and with the popularity of LLMs and like things like ChatGPT and Claude. Increasingly, we're seeing these hybrid copilot types of models, right? So I think that's where the big shift is going right now. That's where we're seeing all the innovation. It's like, well, you could still interact with this the way that you would conventionally, but there's also this copilot component to it, and I think everybody in the space right now is racing to build that copilot and it's really practical for agents, right? Especially because they're always on the go. And they can't just flip their laptop open whenever they want. So their agents are adopting these products that allow them to speak frankly in a mobile setting. And these products will connect to all the different systems that they have access to through things like APIs and MCP servers.
Right.
And that's where we're seeing a lot of innovation right now. It's like getting rid of the interface or the software fatigue they call it, and building products that are much more simple and much more easy to interact with when you're on the go.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
And so for a bit of tip, maybe a bit of hands-on here now. Developers who have discovered this already get it, and they know how to use like how to use the Replier service and what it's all about and what it means and how much time it saves them. For real estate agents who are just getting started, the innovative agent who says, you know what, I've had this idea, I could just never build it. Why don't we give them a practical sort of a how-to in terms of a discovery process so that you take them baby steps. Like, okay, this is your idea. This is sort of the platform. Here's the kind of prompts you would use if you're using AI, or here's the kind of tools that you would use. Here's where repliers come in, and here's what to expect. Why don't we finish off with sort of this kind of an activity?
Sure. So I think, most agents have a website. Like we can agree on that.
Yes.
I think the statistic was like 70%.
I'd hope so. I mean, I'd hope it would be more closer to 100%. I'd be surprised if it was 70%.
Yeah, and I think agents change their websites
Yes.
often, right? They jump from provider to provider, and sometimes it's because they change brokerages, and maybe their brokerage gives them a website, and they figure, okay, I don't need that website that I was using before. So I think that's a good place to start, just because of how much turnover there is in that area.
Sure.
Next time you're in the market for a website, try building it yourself. Right? Go find a vibe coding tool. And I know that sounds complicated, but it really isn't, right? Like, go to Lovable.
Yep.
So
let's simplify it even further, because most agents by now, I would hope, have heard of or used ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, all of these things. So these are this is the first level of AI interaction most agents would have had. Yeah. So Patrick, explain what then Lovable is. What's the difference between a Lovable, a Replit, Base 44, VO, all of those things? What's the difference between that and a ChatGPT, for example? What does it do that's so much more special?
Yeah, it is geared towards product development, right? So ChatGPT is kind of geared towards knowledge lookup, and it's they're starting to it will start to do some things for you as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if they got into this space, given the popularity of it. I mean, right. I think Replit is like a $9 billion company, so people must be taking note. But for the time being, ChatGPT is kind of very broad, whereas these tools like Replit and Lovable are very specific. Like, so it's the same kind of experience. You're just kind of chatting with it or talking to it.
Yes. And
it's doing things for you, but it is more geared towards producing a piece of software for you, or a website for you, or an app, right?
Right. So for example, you could go today into one of these and say something even as simple as build me a real estate website.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's say that's the most basic use, and one of our agents listening to this decides to try this, and they get fascinated, and that wow magical moment happens because it actually built them a real estate website.
Yeah.
What happens after that, Pat? And then the big question then becomes, how do I use this to put my data in? Let's give the practical step in terms of that.
Yeah. So you're going to go down a slippery slope. So that's a good place to start, right? Like just tell it, build me a real estate website, just one sentence, and see what happens. It's going to build you a real estate website. It's not going to be what you wanted. It's not going to have your brokerage information on it. It's not going to have your picture. It might not have your brand, but you're going to tell it this. You're going to say, no, I like these colors better, or here's a picture of me. You're just going to upload a picture, personalize this a bit. And then at some point you're going to say, can you display my listings? And it's going to say, it's going to try, right? It might try scraping your listings from somewhere. Or now I want to stop there because this is important. That's not a compliant solution, right? Like asking Lovable to go and scrape your listings from somewhere and put them on your website is not a compliant way to go about it. So that's where you're going to need a service like Repliers. Like when you get to that point and it's like, okay, well, display my listings or create a consumer search, right? So you'll just go to Repliers, you'll create an account, and you'll sign up and you'll upgrade, and you'll get, the great thing is that before the licensing process completes with your MLS, you'll get access to our sample data. So right away, you can start interacting with some sample data. You could build your website in its entirety, and then the minute that your subscription is completed and the licensing is completed with your MLS, it'll just turn on and you'll see the real data in your website.
And it sounds magical, but when Pat says it'll just turn on and you'll see the data, I mean, that is what actually ends up happening, because that is how these platforms work. And is it perfect? I mean, obviously not. Like last year, I was sharing Pat this story. Last year, I tried this. And then all of a sudden I was faced with so many roadblocks. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Forget this. This is not working. But these platforms have improved over time. So if you have the patience and understanding, and you got to have some sort of logic of how things work, of course, with these websites. And the thing about this whole space is that there are I don't know if there's a lot of you that are in this. I know that by talking to you right now and you're hearing this, some of you will be like, hey, you know what? I'm fed up with the way my website looked. I've always wanted to change it, but I can't figure out this WordPress templates thing. I don't want to pay a designer. They're charging tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not saying everybody does that. So, I mean, if you've got a great designer, that's fine. But then when you go into something like this and say, hey, I want a website that looks like this, or I want a website that looks like that, and you iterate it through chat, it does become a different experience. Not displacing graphic designers or developers in any means. A good graphic designer and developer will probably make a much better website than you. But for the basis of, if you're trying to innovate and you want to put something together, you want to show it to somebody and say, hey, why don't you build this, or why don't you design it this way? It's a great start. And it literally is that, right? Like I've shared with Pat some of the stuff that I built out, and it literally is that simple. So
and it kind of reminds me, like it's why I got started in software to begin with. Like it was, I was so happy when I built something and it worked.
Yes.
And it's giving everybody the opportunity to get that feeling of like, hey, I actually built that myself. Like it's really cool, and you don't get that if you're working with a vendor, or you're working with maybe when you see it all come together, but I think there's something that's special about doing it yourself.
Yeah. And I think the future is this, because you called it the democratization or liberalization of
democratization. Yeah.
Democratization is what you use about that. So, you say goodbye to cookie cutter websites and cookie cutter results, because you could literally, the way your website looks and operates and runs and interacts with the clients that are using it is going to be completely different than somebody else's at some point. And even if everybody started to rip everybody's ideas off, one person will say, look, I have come up with this different way of doing it, and actually you'll get a ton of improvements with that. So
right. Pat, and it's a competitive, it's a competitive business, right? Yeah. And you want to have some uniqueness. You want to have something that differentiates you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Pat, what's the future of Repliers? And then we'll get into, how do our agents or anybody listening, watching, interested in this, how do they learn more? So where's your company going? I know you guys are out there to take over the world and make it easier for everybody to digest real estate data, which you'll only appreciate these statements if you've actually been through these challenges, as Pat has and as many developers has. And I've seen what's under the hood, and it's not fun, I'm telling you. So what's the future for Repliers, and how does anybody who wants to get involved in this, how do they learn more, and how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, I think we're just going to do more of what we started out to do, which is just save people time in this journey. And that means, combining different data sets, not just the data from your board. Like there's local data sets, there's demographic data sets, there's, public record data sets that have like obvious synergies with the MLS data sets. So like, making it easier to build an experience that's, cohesive and holistic from a property data perspective. So that's the future. We will just continue to do more work to make everybody else's lives easier.
Amazing. And how does anybody who wants to learn more about Repliers, get into vibe coding, start building up their websites? You and I talked about doing some workshops together so that we can get more agents aware of this. How do they reach out to you, Pat, and how do they connect with your company?
Go to repliers.com. We have a number of support resources there. We have live chat. We have a help center. We have an AI assistant that you can ask questions. We have a YouTube channel with a bunch of videos, and we plan to do quite a bit more. And a lot of videos around vibe coding as well. Because a year ago, vibe coding was something that was just kind of starting, that we didn't take very seriously, and now it's pretty obvious that that's the way that most folks are going. And I'll one of the other things I'll say is that vibe coding isn't just for people that don't know how to code. Mm-hmm. Even coders are vibe coding, right? It even helps them to do their job, like people that know how to write code, myself included. So so we're going to do a lot to sort of support that demand as well.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for that, because we're going to be working on some stuff with Pat as well to help out in this space. Thank you so much, Pat. And thank you for all of you who have joined. Make sure you like, subscribe. Make sure you keep following Real Estate Strategies with Remax Hallmark. Thanks, Pat. And thank you, Repliers, for joining us. And we'll see you in the next episode. We're going to be talking with more technology guests who are involved in technology that are making real estate agents' lives better. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you in the next time.